right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the One Day Closer podcast. I am your humble host, Jay. Woo! A little extra. All right. Enough of that crazy foolishness. Oh my gosh. I am happy to be back. A couple extra days in between episodes. And what a few weeks it's been. But thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. What a wonderful life it is to live, man. How blessed can we all be? Like I always say, if you wake up in the morning, it's a good day, no matter what the problems we face. So for this episode, I had been doing going with the series, right? The 10 ways to live a more purpose-filled life and what the Bible tells us. So, the series 10 ways to live a more purpose-filled life, from Scripture. And on the last episode, we had touched on, test, right? How to deal with trials and tests in our life. And I'm going to touch a little bit on that. Actually, I'm not going to move on to number 9. This episode, we're actually going to focus on something that is near and dear to my heart. Try to keep it together. And I apologize, the voice is a little rough post-vacation here, but February is MMN Awareness Month. So I do want to talk a lot about that. But before we jump into that, a little recap. Last time we talked, I was having trouble with Medicare approving my treatments. And that got worked out. So if everything is good, which I am told it is, tomorrow I will receive my full treatment. It'll be the first full treatment of the year. And, there's a lot that can be said for that. I was able to get a partial treatment of just my chemo medicine before I left on my trip. So, but here we are. I'm excited about getting it. What are we 6 weeks into the year? And my body just does not do good without the treatment. So happy about that and happy to share that looks like that's worked out. One extra blessing that happened that I've got to share is that, the out-of-pocket, any of us with insurance, we know there's a stiff out-of-pocket cost. And even with my Medicare plan, it's no different. It's less than it has been in the past. But I got some good news that copay assistance I had applied for is going to pay. So tremendous help, tremendous savings for me this year. And considering in more recent years, my copay was about $10,000 a year out of pocket. Needless to say, I'm excited that this year I won't be having to pay that. But who we kidding? Even the $10,000 out of pocket pales in comparison to the over $1 million that costs for my ongoing care. And hey, but that leads us into what we'll talk to here in a little bit. I did want to share a little bit about my travels. I did something I've never done before. I went on a vacation completely by myself. And I'm not going to lie, it was strange. One part of me was enjoying kind of like the mental break, right? I was calling it a sabbatical, and how nice it was just kind of be alone, work some stuff out in my life. 2025 was such, I'll say it, I didn't want to use the word tough or rough, but that's the reality of it. And my health suffered last year for various reasons, some of it my own fault, some of it insurance. And, this disease is no fun. It's no fun, and it can be managed. It can never be cured, and we'll talk more about that. I'm already kind of getting ahead of the talk, but this vacation was a chance just to reflect. And even though, the year started out with that bike crash and more injuries and more insurance problems, this vacation, as I was sorting through things mentally and just trying to absorb it all, I do, have to remind myself God is in control, and He is. And in that sense, the sabbatical did me wonders. Took a cruise, and I've taken cruises in the past and you run across or talk to that person or whether they male or female, and they cruising by themselves, and one part of me was like, "Hey, was I that sad, you know, uh, person cruising alone?" And the thing was, I was not sad because I was alone, even though it was different, right? Being just at a different stage in life that came. Hey, I would encourage others, if you're afraid to travel by yourself, man, take that leap, and because it really was wonderful. And so it's just a quick little jaunt, little 4-day, 5-day cruise, I guess 4 nights to the Bahamas out of Miami. And then on my final day when I got off the ship, I actually stayed in South Beach, Miami. So I had a whole, well, almost a day and a half really in South Beach in the Art Deco district, which is beautiful. And, instead of focusing on the travels, which I've talked about in the past, and this one was no different. I wiped myself out or wore myself out, however you want to call it. This disease, in between treatments, it's kind of like a fuel tank, and there's only going to be so much energy that's available, right? And this time was no different. I ran that tank. I ran it low. Fuel was already low due to lack of treatment, full treatment. And the last couple of days since I've been home, I got home, gosh, where we're 3 days ago now. And it was Saturday, went to church Sunday, and then I had my class Sunday afternoon. So Sunday was still a busy day. And then, come Monday, I was in so much pain. The legs were hurting so bad and so tired, so much fatigue. And then, of course, that was laundry day. Other than that, we didn't do a lot. And today I'm recording this on Tuesday. And this is about the big activity for the day. So if I sound a little tired, I apologize. I knew I couldn't do the podcast yesterday, even though I needed to, because I sounded real tired. And I try, it might not matter to y'all. I try to sound, you know, upbeat. I try to use this podcast to encourage and not discourage. And being honest, it doesn't do no good if I, don't sound up, if I don't sound enthusiastic, if it sounds like I'm dragging. And that actually, I take that into consideration. I wanna sound good, I guess, for y'all. And I don't believe that's a bad thing. So, like I said, today's not as much strength as I would prefer, but I did want to get this episode out. And so enough of all of that. One observation though, real quick. So on the cruise and even in South Beach, Miami, you know, people from all over the world, different backgrounds and man, no problems. Just everybody treating each other with respect, common decency. Even at the South Beach, truly international experience. I felt I needed to parlez-vous français. It was a lot of people from France that I interacted with. And again, just, everybody just getting along, man, and being respectful of each other. And I've said it before in the past, sometimes you just got to turn off the TV. The media tries to tell us how much we're different, how much we're divided, how much we're supposed to hate each other. And that's not the case, man. And just get out and experience the world. So I had a wonderful time, met some great people, even made a couple of new friends out of it. Randy and Eddie, hey, if y'all listening to this episode in Tennessee, man, it was such a pleasure to meet y'all and your wives. And thank y'all. Thank y'all for y'all friendship. And I look forward to seeing y'all when y'all make it down here into South Alabama. So enough of all of that. The big thing that is very important to me and that I want to share, and I will do this every February, is February is World Awareness Month for MMN, multifocal motor neuropathy. And that is the disease that I have I have gotten. It's an autoimmune disease. And, you know, it can't be cured, right? It can be managed. But I wanna do my part, so I'm gonna get some papers here. Okay, so and y'all bear with me because I'm gonna be reading, so if you hear paper rustling, it is what it is. But, what is multifocal motor neuropathy? MMN is a rare disorder in which focal areas of multiple motor nerves are attacked by one's own immune system. Oof, sorry about that. You know, it's it's a strange thing. You have a disease. I mean, I know what it is, right? And I deal with it every day. But I don't know what it is, man. I can bust out some paperwork here and I don't know. It kind of, I don't know what I don't know what to say there, but let's try to focus here, man. This is information I want to share. So, disorder and rare. Oh boy, is it rare. Don't hit the disease lottery. Typically, MMN is slowly progressive, resulting in asymmetrical weakness of the patient's limbs. Those of y'all that have been following me from the beginning know that that whole slowly progressive thing went out the window. Mine was very aggressive in its progression. I went from completely healthy to quadriplegic in 6 weeks. It did develop in my hands first, and it moved to my legs. All this information I'm sharing too is from the GBS International, the foundation website. I'll share some more information on that towards the end. Whew. But weakness in the patient's hands, resulting in dropping of objects, and sometimes inability to turn a key in a lock. And hey, I said I was finished talking about the cruise, but one story I've got to share, and this happened, of course, on the first day. I had made my first plate of food, and if you've cruised, there's eating is the main pastime on the cruises. And I was heading to get a little glass of water or a cup of water. So I set my plate down. Of all things, I think it was on top of the water machine, but it was high up, so about chest level for me. Got my cup of water and I grabbed my plate, which, yeah, may or may not have been a little heavy. And I dropped the whole plate and the food hit the counter, splashed up onto my clothes, all over my shoes. And, it's just times like that that remind me of this crazy disease. I try to forget, but it has ways of reminding us, right? And so as I read this about, hey, sometimes drop objects, hey, I could tell you it happens more times than I'd care to admit. Turning a lock, yes, is difficult. The fine motor movements of the fingers, the strength in the hands or lack of strength in hands and wrist, what gets me. So back to the documents here. The weakness associated with MMN can be recognized as fitting a specific nerve territory. I'm not quite sure what they mean there, but for me, it's lower arms and lower legs are the worst. When I was at my sickest, I could move my shoulders, but really nothing below the biceps. And my legs, I could move at the hip, but I couldn't move anything basically mid thigh and down. So I'm guessing that's what they're talking about, the territories. They go on to say that there's essentially no numbness or tingling or pain. Some of that is incorrect, at least for my case. Initially, there was tons of numbness and tingling. And now I'm actually very fortunate. I don't get the numbness or the tingling. And actually the pain, it's not nerve pain. And I guess that's what they're talking about, that, hey, your nerves are damaged, but there's no pain. For me, the pain is from exertion of the muscles. So the nerve damage makes it hard for me to use my arms and legs. And so there's no nerve pain, but I get muscle pain. So like right now, the trip I just took, there was a fair amount of walking and my legs hurt terribly. Now, it's not nerve pain, but it's muscle pain. And so it said patients with MMN can have other symptoms, including twitching or a small random dimpling of the muscles under the skin, which neurologists call fasciculations. I don't get that near as much as I used to. It's always interesting when I do. When I first got sick, it was so bad, these fasciculations, that the doctors that were examining me, local and the ones at UAB in Birmingham, had never seen a case as mine. I remember there was one neurologist that, he asked me if he could do it, but he ultimately brought his med students to see my fasciculations because they were so bad. Clinical course MMN is chronically progressive and without remission. I have faith that one day there'll be a cure. I hope it's in my lifetime. I am blessed with treatments that help me manage this disease. And if it doesn't happen in my lifetime, I still want it to happen for those like myself. And trust me, there's not many of us. This disease is life-changing and not in a good way. Paperwork goes on to say the prevalence of this very rare disease is estimated to be 0.6 cases out of every 100,000 people. Makes it even rarer than Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS, right? Which is a spontaneously self-limiting disorder which affects 1 to 2 people out of 100,000. And this is just in North America and Europe, those statistics. I had saw something not long ago that basically, I think here in America, it puts us at about 3,200, 3,300 patients that are affected with this disease. Fortunately, most are not as severe as mine. Doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy that I probably have one of the worst cases of this crazy disease. But that's my cross to bear. And I try to make it something positive out of something that is meant to be negative. That's why I work in patient advocacy. That is why, as I'm doing now, right, sharing this information, letting people know that what those of us out there with it are dealing with. MMN has many features similar to CIDP. CIDP is basically chronic Guillain-Barré syndrome. CIDP's onset is progressive over time, causing increased disability that reflects the greater number of nerve sites involved. And like I've said about my case, it was both arms and both legs. And however, unlike CIDP, MMN is asymmetric, which means the right and left side are affected differently. And when I was at my worst, I'm going to say it was equal, but it was both equally terrible. But it could have been varying degrees. As I stand before you now, no pun intended, my left hand is affected more than my right hand, and my right leg is affected more than my left leg. It still affects all 4 extremities. But there is a difference, especially at this point. Goes on to say, unlike other forms of chronic nerve inflammation, it is thought to never remit. Oh, woohoo, right? However, the appropriate treatment that is FDA approved does limit progression and improves function. And again, if you've been following me, you know the miracle I received and how much function I have gained back. Sadly, this is definitely the exception, not the rule, right? What causes MMN? Well, that's a whole nother subject, but this document here says it's associated with increased levels of specific antibodies. It's the GM1 antibody, and it's ganglioside of sugar-containing lipid found in the peripheral nerves. Antibodies normally protect the individual from virus and bacteria, but may under certain circumstances, these antibodies will bind to and facilitate an immune attack on the peripheral nerves. These antibodies have been detected in almost all of MMN patients, there are patients out there that their GM1 antibodies are not increased. In my case, it is. When they've tested me for GM1 antibodies, mine are elevated. Even if these antibodies do not cause nerve damage, they believe they can be an important marker, right, for facilitating a proper diagnosis. And that is one thing with my disease and similar also for CIDP is it's hard to get a correct diagnosis, right? For me, I was fortunate, and at the time I didn't feel fortunate, but I was fortunate that ultimately I got a diagnosis within about 5.5 months. The average is usually a 1 year plus. And, unfortunately, even in that 5.5 months, there's so much nerve damage that has been permanent. And if I could have gotten diagnosed sooner, then, my doctor believes that they could have reduced, some of the long-term damage. But that's water under the bridge. We deal. And like I said, it could have been so much worse. If I would have waited another 6 months, I probably would never have the ability to walk again. So how is it diagnosed? Well, we just talked about the GM1 antibodies and being elevated. Patient has a purely motor disorder, right, affecting the nerves. And basically what they're saying there is there's no sensory effect, right? I could still feel. They would poke the hands and feet with needles and various other fun little tools to make sure that I could feel, and amazingly we could feel it all. Just couldn't move as I would lay there smiling. One of the other things is that there's no upper motor neuron signs for brisk reflexes at the knees and ankles. And definitely I can vouch for that. I even, here we are a little over 5 years into it. I have had a return to some reflexes right in my arms and legs. So that is good. There's no difficulty speaking or swallowing. And again, these are just some of the ways they diagnose. And we talked about no sensory deficits. And thank God I didn't have any problem swallowing. Nurses and Christy probably would have loved it if I would have had a little more difficulty speaking. It's amazing how needy you can get when you're laying in a bed and you can't move. So thank God I was able to still communicate my needs. Let's see, the last thing they're saying here, there is evidence of focal areas of the nerves which the electrical impulses are slowed or blocked, and they call these conduction blocks. They can be detected on the electrophysiology test. I hope I just said that right. And boy, if you ever want to have a party, get in a conduction block test, especially when they kick it in and they use the little, as I call it, like an acupuncture needle. And they stick that in your nerves and they run electricity through them and they measure if it's conducting or not. I've had to have it twice, 3 times. I've had 3. And the last one was actually about a year ago, I guess a year ago in February. Thank God I don't think I'll have to have any more. And actually the last one was some good news because it did show that we have regained a little bit of some of those blocked areas. My body has made some new pathways, and that's a good sign. Those criterias that I just read are used to differentiate MMN from ALS, which if you're familiar with that, also called Lou Gehrig's disease. Oh, man, at the beginning, more than just one doctor and more than one family member was concerned that I had ALS. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it was just an internal thing or trying to be optimistic. I just never felt that was it, but we were working with that. So the criteria I read off, helps differentiate that. A neurologist is usually needed to determine a diagnosis. So if yourself or family members having any of those signs and symptoms, definitely get to a specialist, right? And they'll, get your history, do a physical exam, and then they'll, like I said, they'll do the electro diagnostic study, the conduction block study, and they'll check for those GM1 antibodies. They also check your protein levels. They'll do a little spinal tap, which that was fun. And if you remember an episode in the past, I talked about that. They stuck me 3 times and still couldn't get what they needed. But luckily, 2 more times up at UAB, and they got it on the second time. So 5 sticks in the lower spine. But hey, we've learned my body does not behave normal. So some kind of medical freak show. How it is treated. The big treatment that is the standard is intravenous immunoglobulins, or IVIG, and that is one of the medicines I'm on. It's a medicine, it's antibodies obtained from healthy volunteers that can be readily given via IV. And it is the only treatment for disorder that is approved by the FDA and regulatory agencies in Europe and Canada, and of course, America. IVIG comes from plasma donations. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I will say it again in the future. Thank you. If you donate plasma, thank you. Without the kindness of those donations and the sacrifice of those donations, patients like me would not have a chance at life. It takes, just for me, just for one patient, it's over 250 plasma donations have to happen just for me. I'm very thankful. And last night, actually, I was at my men's group, and there's a guy in there, and we got to talking. He says, "Hey, I give plasma, And A, I loved hearing that, but B, to be able to not only thank him for that, because he was not aware of my condition, but he was, he wasn't aware of necessarily, what the plasma goes for. So I was able to thank him and educate him that he's helping patients like myself. I love this. This document says, hey, usually requires treatment every 2 to 5 weeks, and over time may need to increase the dose. I am at every 2 weeks now. For the first 3 years, I was every week. We went to 2. I've been hoping to go to 3, but my body doesn't like playing that schedule, so we're staying at 2. So far, I have not had to up the dose of the medicine for me, so I'm still on the same dose with that. And that medicine, the IVIG is not a cure, right? But no other therapy has proven to be widely effective in limiting. Oh, here you go. I was getting ahead of myself in the reading, right? No other therapy has been proven to widely be effective. Here it says, in a limited number of patients, a cancer chemotherapy drug is temporarily effective. Now, the chemo drug I'm on is not a cancer chemo drug. It's actually was created for another illness called myasthenia gravis, and I hope I'm saying that right. And here it's saying this chemo drug they limit the use because it is toxic and the side effects and the risk that occurs with chronic use. Well, I can tell you, it whips my butt, and the treatment makes me sick. But to me, the effectiveness outweighs those side effects. And, as far as the toxicity, the one I just listed here, they don't give a time frame. It's been mentioned to me that, 15, 20 years to medicine will kill me if, if nothing else does before then, and I'm okay with that. If it's 15 to 20 years of a better life, a better quality of life. But who knows? Like I said, I'm still staying prayerful and hold out that there's a cure on the horizon. Some of the other treatments are like steroids and plasma exchange. Those don't work for MMN, and they actually make the disease worse. Those work for CIDP, for GBS. And the cool thing is I had that done twice. Both times it almost killed me. One of the happiest parts when I finally did receive a correct diagnosis was when a doctor told me that exactly this, right? That plasma exchange is ineffective and actually contraindicated in MMN, and that I would no longer have to have those treatments. Because I didn't know much during those early days of this illness, but I know that every time I got that treatment, I almost died. And that's not a good thing, is it, right? So, but, more investigations around the world are taking place to try to get a better understanding of the disease. So that's enough of the reading the document. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at the clock too. Such a nice long, might be one of the longest episodes I've done. So I will finish up with, again, like I said, this is February is MMN Awareness Month, and some resources. And if you feel compelled to give to help, the website is GBS-CIDP.org. Again, GBS-CIDP.org. That website is for the GBS CIDP Foundation International. There you can make a tax-deductible donation that aids in research, that helps us in patient advocacy. I know I've shared late last year, I am now the patient liaison for the Mobile, Alabama, and the Gulf Coast region. And I can't tell you how proud I am to say that I am. This foundation has helped me with so many things along this journey. And the fact that I can play a small part for other patients, let them know they're not alone, let them know that they're not fighting by themselves, that we're all in this together. It's like I said, it's so much. I'm so proud to do that. And I hope I can achieve everything I want by building a community in this area. So, with that, my friends, I would have never guessed it was going to go this long, but I will hold off on completely on working in our 10-part series. I will say thank you from the bottom of my heart as we go through this month of February. And patients like myself and organizations like the GBS International try to raise awareness and educate the public about these diseases, and this one in particular this month. I appreciate if y'all can share the information. You know, we do this one person at a time, but just know there's some crazy stuff out there. I thank you so much, each and every one of y'all, that helped make my journey easier, because I know I'm not alone. You listen to this podcast, you hear me talk about my journey, you email me, you text me, you let me know that as I go on my journey, I'm helping others. And it's not just others with these rare diseases. But just know, I truly, truly appreciate y'all. With that, I'm going to wrap things up. Like I always say, always have faith, always trust in Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. He carries me through this journey. Trust Him, have faith. He will help you on your journey, whatever that journey is, whatever those trials are. And remember, live your spirit.